Alexander the Great wept because there were no more worlds to conquer. On this episode of the Grow with Tim podcast, J.D. and Tim are jumping in to talk about leadership. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another great episode talking through leadership here on the Grow with Tim podcast. I'm J.D. This is Tim, and we're growing with Tim, so I'm just here leading and helping facilitate the conversation.
We got to rename this thing because you're a critical part of this.
No.
At the start, we just didn't name it right.
Most of what you guys see out there, if you're not just listening to our podcast, which I know many of you probably just listen to the podcast and even binge listen, but on all the social platforms, mostly you just see Tim. So I think it's fine to still be Grow with Tim. So I show up from time to time, but I am privileged to be a part of these conversations, helping not just everyone else out there who's that probably growth executive or business coach or manager leveling up in their life and others, but I get to participate too, man. So I appreciate it.
Good deal. We're here to talk about leadership today. So the question is, what is leadership? Everything rises and falls with leadership, right? You've heard that. You've experienced that, no doubt. You've experienced good leaders and bad leaders. You've probably worked for them. You've worked with them. They've worked for you. And I guess the first question is, what is leadership? Because if you ask 10 different people what leadership is, you get 10 different answers. So
right.
Let me ask you.
Yeah.
What is leadership?
Well, that's a tough one because it's kind of like success and failure, right? We can define success a million different ways. But failure is always defined the same way, and it's failure to achieve your goals.
Yeah, right?
But success can be 100 different things.
Even failure can be defined different ways, right? I always say failure is only failure if you fail to learn from it. So, all right, but leadership, I think is...
Okay, what do you got?
So Peter Drucker says that leadership is influence. And I love Peter Drucker. He's the premier management leadership consultant. But I think that falls short because influence is like I can point a gun at your head and make you do something. I've got influence, but I'm not really a good leader. So that falls short.
Well, that doesn't mean you are not a leader. It just means you're a bad one.
Maybe,
See, it's still leadership because there's leadership by force or position, right? But that's really on like the 5 levels of leadership that I want to get into a little bit later. I believe that's near the bottom.
That's number 1.
Yeah.
It's at the base. It's like you might follow me because you have to.
Right.
Am I a leader? Well, yeah, but that's a pretty crappy form of leadership,
we all agree. We all
Yeah.
agree. So
Yeah.
the fact that you're questioning my man Peter Drucker seems a little bit like
it's a little
pretentious.
arrogant, maybe. It might be.
Well, I'll let you keep going.
All right. So the question is, what is leadership? I think that leadership is doing what needs to be done without being told.
Okay.
That's also incomplete, but it's a good start. So,
well, that seems more like influence from someone else for.
Well, I think it's self-leadership. Leadership has to start with self-leadership. So I talk to my employees, right? If I walk in and I see a piece of paper on the floor, on the carpet, and I pick it up, that's actually a form of leadership. It's a pretty elementary form, but it's seeing something that needed to be done. And look, we've got a client coming in 5 minutes, and they're going to have a bad impression of us if this piece of paper is on the floor. It needs to be done. It doesn't matter that I'm the CEO. I'm going to pick it up because it needs to be done, and I'm not going to wait for somebody else to do it or to tell me to do it. That's actually a base level of leadership. I think leadership is a lot more than that. But at its root, it's seeing something that needs to be done and doing without being told. I think moving on from there, you have a much more exciting form of leadership is casting a vision.
Okay, right.
Where there might be complacency.
Yes.
Right? So it's like, we're doing our thing. We're happy with the status quo. But look, there's something better. We could have a better tomorrow than our yesterday. And the role of a leader is to cast that vision where there's complacency.
Well, the scriptures say that where there is no vision, the people perish. So that's a form of the leadership, right? Like you're saying, casting a vision out there in the future, looking at a better tomorrow or looking at what's not there today. I think that really falls in line with entrepreneurship as a definition, right? We're creating something that is currently not there, and we're communicating that to other people or the world or even ourselves, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of us get excited, people like me get excited about vision, but I think leadership, if all you do is cast the vision, you've probably fallen short.
Okay.
So next, I think you've got to give clarity where there is ambiguity, right? So, I'm confused. What exactly is it that you want me to do? or what exactly is the problem that we're trying to solve, or what there's ambiguity, and a leader takes that mess and organizes it and communicates clearly and gives clarity where there was ambiguity. So I think that's number 2.
Yeah, I think it's really important. So my question is, are you saying that leadership is also kind of giving responsibility out there to other folks? You know what I'm saying? Like clarity, like I'm wondering about.
I think you're getting ahead of me with
doing.
that. I think that's the third thing, which is giving direction where there's confusion.
Okay, got
right?
it. All right.
So you've got to cast a vision. Somebody said that if you want to build a ship, don't like go around and find people and say, hey, go gather wood. Hey, assign this task and this job, right? That's not how to build a ship.
All right.
The way to build a ship is to tell people about the wonders and immensity of the sea. Mm-hmm. And when they get excited about being on the sea, then you're like, hey, let's build a ship. And the ship will get done better, faster, cheaper, with more energy and engagement and alignment than if you say, hey, you go get wood and you drive this nail and
right.
Whatever.
I think that reminds me of what I've always heard about how Walt Disney crafted his masterpiece, Disneyland, right? In 55, when they opened Disneyland, the first thing that they were supposed to build, if I'm thinking right, but it may have been actually Disney World, because I'm not as familiar with Disney World.
I think Disneyland happened first, and then
Disney, because it was like 1970 Disneyland, Walt Disney World Resorts, but they built Cinderella's castle first.
Yeah.
You know,
and everybody got excited.
Yeah, we're not going to build the moat. We're not going to build the roads. We're not going to build the train, monorail, trams, or whatever, the teacups, right?
Yeah.
We're going to build the vision, Cinderella's castle. Of course, everyone knew that was a masterpiece of 1940 or 41, whenever they created that film. So that was what we had to look forward to. And they realized that monstrosity in the middle of nowhere, right? Wherever they were building in the swamps of Florida or in the desert of Southern California, that was representative of all the smiles they were putting in the kids and the families' hearts, and they all knew that, so they build that first.
Yeah, that's good. All right, so what I want to do for the next few minutes, and if you're listening to this, maybe driving down the road, you probably can't actually do this, but I want you to at least think mentally, and we're going to do it live for you. Okay. I want you to think about 3 to 5 leaders that you respect and admire. These might be political leaders. They might be religious leaders. They might be community leaders. They might be business leaders. That it doesn't have to be some really famous person. It could be somebody that you know personally. Hopefully, it's somebody that you at least know something about. Right? You've read a book about them, an autobiography or a history book or something. So, Jeremiah, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
When you think of great leaders, give me 2, 3, 4, 5 names.
I would say that. Give me a category, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. So which one? Let's say, any of the above. Let's start with political leaders who comes to mind as not necessarily that you agreed with all of his or her policies, but somebody that you think exhibited good leadership and not just influential, like Hitler had influence.
Right. Because I think that I would have said like Hitler's a great leader, and from time to time in conversations like this, he gets brought up because of course he mobilized whatever it was at the time, I don't know, something like 20 million Germans and Austrians at that time. But, political leader in our era, I think that most people would consider a great leader would be, I'll go with one of the past American and one of the current American species would be Ronald Reagan.
You took my answer.
Man. Okay, and Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, both of those are on my list for sure.
Okay, sure.
Whether or not you agree with their policies,
right, of course.
I think there are a lot of leadership qualities that we can all agree on both of those guys.
Yeah,
right?
Qualities are there.
Okay, Lincoln and Reagan, for sure. All right, let's say in a social space, in social reform, who comes to mind as a great leader?
Mark Zuckerberg.
Okay.
Social reform, because he created something, the mantra and motto behind the vision of Facebook was to connect and share.
Yeah.
And boy, did he do that across something like 2 out of 7 people in the world.
Yeah.
Right? On Facebook, of course.
It's incredible. Okay. Yeah. Who else? So Martin Luther King comes to mind.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Martin Luther King.
Too, but
you're
of
just course.
Trying not to pick the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, of course. I do. Yes, I do. Yeah, Martin Luther King in my own one-man show.
Right.
And of course, he mobilized the people to see a vision of a couple of things, right? The promised land, the greater American experiment, the beloved community, and all those things when he gave his dream to the American people.
All right, so how about a business leader? Who can you think of that has been, that you respect and admire, and you say, I would like to follow that kind of person?
In business, I think that I'll give you one that the world out there doesn't know.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why that's important to me specifically, because I think that's cool. But one that we all kind of probably know is probably the vision of Steve Jobs and his leadership, because he clarified what he thought people would really want, and it didn't exist yet at all. He wasn't comparing it to anything that had ever existed before. So when he came out in 2007 with that iPhone, there was a lot of pieces that he put out there in the world that didn't exist at all. You know, and we didn't know that we wanted a phone with no buttons.
Yeah, right.
We didn't know what a phone was that we could take around like that. That was also a computer, right? So there's that one, and there's also another one. There's a man from Birmingham, Alabama, and he died in the 90s. He was 100 plus years old, just over the century mark. His name was A.G. Gaston. Okay. A.G. Gaston was born to previously, his grandparents, I believe, were enslaved. Okay. And then his mother, these are cotton-picking, indentured servant type, sharecropping people of that era. And he created, so somewhere along the 60s, 70s, 80s, he was the richest black person in America. Okay. And his business was insurance. Okay. Mostly burial insurance, starting off and trying to come up with, and this man had no education at all. But over the course of the early 20th century, he started to build, recruit, send folks out for a vision of a better and more respectable life and burial and death, because that didn't exist for African Americans.
Yeah. All right, so hopefully to our listeners, you've thought of some of your own people. Maybe you've put Winston Churchill or Queen Elizabeth or Margaret Thatcher. Maybe you've put in business leaders like Jack Welch or Steve Jobs or Bob
Michael
Iger.
Jordan. Sports, absolutely. Right? He made everyone better, apparently, around him, right?
Yeah, right.
We all saw the films. Yeah.
You've got political leaders, you've got community leaders, you've got maybe religious leaders in there. Here's the question. What knowledge, skills, attitudes, character qualities, habits do these leaders hold in common? So if you're listening and you've got the luxury of actually being able to write it down, I hope you've written down a list of 3 or 4 or 5 leaders that you respect and admire. And now beside it, write down a list of things that you notice about these folks. So again, putting you on the spot, what do you notice about these great leaders that you've mentioned?
I think there's 2 things that come to mind every time because of some of the skills God has given me and the talents. One is they communicate well. Yeah. They communicate a lot, right? I heard several years ago from someone who I was a local business and social influencer leader that I was kind of under his menteeship, as a mentorship, as a mentee. Was leaders are repeaters. They say the same thing a lot because you're saying the same old stuff to just new people. Yeah, or you have to remind people about what you said last time. Yeah. So that's one thing. And the other one is a very, very high standard to where they hold themselves. Yeah. They hold themselves to a standard that no one else actually holds them to. Yeah. Now, we've seen a lot of leaders fall because of that, right? Yeah. We've held them to a certain level, and they haven't lived up to that in the long run, or we didn't realize they were hiding stuff. But most of the time, I think we would agree that the Michael Jordans of the world, he said, the reason that I was producing at the level I was producing is because I held myself to a higher standard than any other player or coach or fan.
Yeah. I heard a story, and you know that I'm not into sports, and I'm probably going to get the details wrong. I wasn't prepared for this, but I think it was Jerry Rice, who evidently all-time great football player, right?
Yeah, the wide receiver.
Yeah, right. So I heard about some rookie showing up to practice, and the rookie got there like 45 minutes early, and his goal to be there first, right? Okay. Jerry Rice was already there, all right, working out or whatever. And then the coach says, okay, we're going to do a little warm up, and they go out, and the quarterback is throwing passes, and they're supposed to line up, and the guy gets the pass, and he runs out and catches the pass, and then throws it back to the quarterback, right? And it just repeat one after the other. Yep. And so this rookie goes, and he runs out, does his pattern, catches the ball, throws it back, and then Jerry Rice comes up. And they're way down 3/4 of the way from whatever end zone they were pointing toward. Right. So Jerry Rice catches the ball, but instead of throwing it back to the quarterback, he takes off like a rocket and zigzags his way all the way to the end zone in the opposite end of the field. And then he runs back and hands the ball back to the quarterback. And this rookie is like, what the heck, Jerry? Why'd you do that? And Jerry says, well, I have a rule. Every time these hands touch a football, this body ends up in an end zone. And so even in a practice warm-up, like he was outworking everybody. Yep. And absolutely, did Jerry Rice have influence over that team? Was he a leader? For sure. And I think most of the time leaders hold themselves to a really high standard. And it's not them, riding in a truck pointing at fingers, dig harder, dig faster, right? It's they're holding themselves to a high standard.
And I love that story. I've heard it once or twice. As far as I know, you got the details right? Look, I go to the end zone. I think I read it or heard it one time. And the second thing that's interesting is when you're communicating that to other people, like you said, he communicated it not to show the rookie what he was supposed to do, but what Jerry held himself to. But he even communicated that to other people, and everyone knew what Jerry was about. And see, I think that communication level and style, and we live in a digital age now, and you can communicate things over the internet, but so important.
Can you think of a leader, a good leader,
good leader,
that was not or is not an effective communicator?
See, that one's hard because I think there are so many people that are great leaders, but they fall short on what we would consider leadership because they're not good at communicating.
I think at a minimum, no doubt there are people who exhibit lots of leadership qualities that are not naturally gifted communicators. But I think it's difficult to see somebody who... It's difficult to think of somebody who could not be better by improving their communication.
Yes, I would agree with that. Now, there's actually somebody in all of our recent memory who's very famous and popular that I went back and watched the footage, as we would say in sports world, watched film on it and thought to myself, wait a minute, based on what the world is saying in the news and CNN and Fox and all those people, this person has been regarded as a good leader in certain circles, but the problem was communication. And that person, Colin Kaepernick. So Colin Kaepernick, of course, many of us know that there's all this stuff about kneeling at the national anthem. Now, if you go back, because if you're fuzzy on this type of social type of commentary, and it's just not your thing, totally fine, in terms of black, white, police, brutality, American issues, and things like that, totally fine, NFL or otherwise. But I realized that in the beginning, when they were in the locker room talking to him, still playing for the 49ers, because this is obviously the 49ers episode now at this point, because Jerry Rice and Colin Kaepernick is, hey, Colin, what would you say about all the folks in the world who are in the community who are saying disrespect to our country, disrespect to the flag, disrespect to first responders? And he said, I have the utmost respect for these people. That's not my issue. Also, I have family members who are on the police force and in the military, whatever. No. I'm kneeling for this police brutality. And I listened to that commentary once or twice that he was giving to reporters, and I thought to myself, his issue is he's not communicating his point well enough, and it was easy for the media to veer onto something else. It's like he keeps trying to say, but he's not an outspoken, loud guy, not an influencing body presence. And I was like, he's losing people for a lack of, one is there people are ornery and this is the news, but he's losing people because he's not able to effectively convince them of what he's actually saying. They keep saying what they want. They keep saying about him something else.
We did a whole episode a couple months ago about communication, and one of the things we observed was, look, if you communicate at, say, a 5, right, scale of 1 to 10, and you're a 5 communicator, but you have subject matter expertise at an 8, right? Guess what? You are evaluated, you're perceived, you're judged, you're effective, you're paid at a 5. Not an 8, right? Even though you're technically really capable and you've got lots of value to bring, if you can only communicate at this level, that creates the lid for your effectiveness. And I think it creates a lid for leadership too. So if you aspire to more leadership, everybody, if you're listening to this, you're probably already a leader, but if you aspire to lead better, to lead more people, to have more influence, to have better results, you're probably going to have to improve your communication. Everybody. I think of myself as a reasonably competent communicator, but I need to get better as a communicator. We all do. So, all right. So one of the things we observed, right? Ronald Reagan, great communicator. Other people that we've talked about. we see communication,
Mm-hmm.
we see they're holding themselves to a high standard.
Yeah.
Right. What else shows up?
I think that one of the things that I wanted to, where I really learned about the leadership principles was in a book we've mentioned from time to time, Jim Collins' Good to Great.
Yeah.
He talks about these levels of
level
leadership,
5
right?
leader.
Yeah. Level 5 leader, what's a level 4 group, a level 4
Yeah.
team, level 5 team, and all this stuff. Now, this is kind of new to me. I didn't have any research behind this prior to thinking through his concepts. And that level 5 leadership was a big part of what he talked about, which apparently was very prevalent in Abraham Lincoln's life. Humility.
Yes.
Big deal for some
Yes.
reason. I was like, I never would have guessed. If
Yes.
you lined up 10, 20, 50 attributes, I wouldn't have thought humility would have been the...
So for those of you that are not familiar with Jim Collins' work, he did a bunch of research and he identified 5 companies that had been good companies, and then something happened and they became great. And he studied and did all kinds of empirical evidence gathering and analysis, and he said, what happened to make this good company great? And he identified these various principles. One of them was that they were led by these level 5 leaders that had a humble confidence about them. It wasn't that they were humble like, oh, I'm just going to keep my head down and not. They had
Right.
confident humility. They were open to being wrong. They weren't arrogant, but they still exhibited confidence. They set the direction. They inspired a vision, and it's that beautiful mix of humility and confidence that makes such a great
very
leader.
very strange kind of combination that I wouldn't have thought. And so many people and organizations, and maybe your team is operating, if you're thinking and doing well and you're hitting goals at a level 4. But this level 5 was this superhuman thing that I thought, because these folks, it wasn't based on their personality, is really what the humility was. It was, in Abraham Lincoln, we kind of all understand that obviously in the Western world, it was the idea that the number one thing is the union's got to stay together. It wasn't based on him.
Right.
Specifically, it wasn't based on his ideas. If you've done the homework that I've done, he had some very flawed ideas about superiority still of white people and things like that. But he knew or thought or believed that the union had to survive.
Yeah.
And so
good. Talk us through. We've been talking about these 5 levels.
Yeah.
Talk us through those.
Yeah, so what I pulled up here to kind of reference here is number 1, position. We mentioned that earlier. So that's that influence of that person who's pointing the gun at you.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm your
is
boss. I'm signing your
yes.
paycheck, so I've
Yes.
got automatic
Right.
authority. You've got to follow me.
That's a bully at school. That's an
Yeah.
authoritative parent, So their position gives them the authority. So that's Hitler, right?
Yeah.
Bad dude. We all agree on that at this point. Okay, number 2 is permission.
Yeah.
And people follow because they want to follow you.
Right.
Okay?
So somebody else, this is Jim Collins, I think 5 levels. I think John Maxwell states these a little different, but
Yes, he
they're
does,
kind of
right.
universal principles. Maxwell says that at first they follow you because they have to.
Mhm.
Hopefully level 2, they follow you because they like you, right? So, okay, permission.
Yep.
Next.
There we go. So we've got position, then permission. Then 3 is production.
Production. So
Keep-
I get
Yep.
results.
Yes.
Right? I mean, I produce results, and so if you want to be successful, you're going to get on my train because my train is going somewhere.
That is true. Right.
Okay.
Okay, then level 4, ready? It's people development. It's not just results,
Yeah.
but it's what you've done for them specifically.
So you follow me because I care about you and I'm investing in your growth. I'm actually not just looking at you as a cog in a machine, but I'm investing in you and trying to help you get better, not just as an employee, but as a person. And you naturally want to follow somebody that cares about you and wants to invest in you, right?
Right, and that's natural, right? And some of it is still self-serving, is what we're saying here in the level 4. It's because this person cares about me, they'll do things for me or help me. And then level 5, what Maxwell calls the pinnacle. The pinnacle. People follow because of who you are and what you represent.
Yeah, it comes down to character and what you stand for and what you represent. You're standing in for a bigger vision, and the kind of person you are and the things that you stand for naturally amass leaders. And that's sort of the level 5 leadership, not to be confused with Jim Collins, who talks about this confident humility. So leadership isn't just telling people what to do. I think that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Leadership isn't just influence, though it certainly includes influence. It's this confident humility. It's casting a vision. It's providing clarity where there is ambiguity, providing direction where maybe there's some confusion or I'm not sure how to get there. And it's facilitating great teamwork. So we got to bring this to a close, but a couple questions for you. why do you think there are so few leaders in most organizations? Like most organizations, especially small companies, you walk in and it's like the genius with 1,000 helpers. Yeah. You've got the entrepreneur, the CEO, the business owner who's working really hard and telling everybody what to do, and he's got 1,000 helpers. But if he doesn't show up, they maybe aren't going to do the right things or anything at all. There's not a lot of leadership.
Yeah, I think one of the things is what you said before. It's not a clear vision that everyone buys into of where this whole ship is supposed to go at all.
Yep.
So that's one of the things. Another thing that I think is actually pretty natural by those driven, growth-minded professionals and people that we talk to is that that's who they are already on the inside. So they just assume, or it's harder to work with people. Like, why isn't everybody like this? Yeah. I'm already like this, and I hold myself to high standards. Or I'm trying to consider or hit some sort of goal. And so it's easier for them, and communicating that or having leadership for other people is different.
I've told you before, probably the best thing about college for me, I was homeschooled. I lived in a small farming community in the Midwest. And in retrospect, it was a pretty insular life.
Sure,
right? Everybody was like me. And when I got to college and moved into the dorms, I remember so clearly partway through my freshman semester, I mean, it sounds ridiculous now. It's like, well, duh, didn't you know that? But I remember this epiphany, realizing, wow, these people are not like me. They don't think like me. They don't value the same things. They don't make the decisions the same way. They don't these people are not at all like me. And that's okay. But I didn't know that people like that existed. Everybody I knew was sort of like me, And it was such a valuable experience for me. So I think that a lot of entrepreneurs just assume that, well, I show up and I come with batteries included, I'm self-motivated. Why aren't you, right? And they assume that. I think another reason why is because most entrepreneurs don't give their teams safe spaces to fail, right? So the entrepreneur has made mistakes, right? I've made mistakes. You've made mistakes.
Of course.
And we know that part of life is learning from those mistakes and moving on. But look, if you work for me, and you take a little risk, and you try to do something good, and you make a decision without my authorization, and it goes badly, and I come in and get mad at you, and I blow up, and I say, "You stupid! Why'd you make that decision?" Well, guess what? The next time you're just going to keep your head down and try not to get in trouble.
Yeah.
But if I reward you and I say, "Hey, man, let's talk about so that didn't work out. Let's talk about why it didn't work out. How we make a better decision." But kudos to you for making the call. Good job taking initiative, taking a risk, trying to do the right thing. I'm going to applaud that you made a decision, even if it wasn't the optimal decision, right? And I think as you do that, and as you teach people, they come to you for a problem. Joe comes in my office and says, "Hey, boss, you got a problem, and here's what it is." And if I just solve the problem and I say, "Okay, go do this," Joe never learns to problem solve and never learns leadership himself. But what if I say, "Hey, okay, well, what do you think we should do about it?" "Oh, I don't know. I mean, you're the boss." "Well, here's what I want you to do. Go back to your office and come up with at least 3 possible solutions, and then check back in with me after lunch, and let's talk through them." So Joe comes back and he says, "Okay, I got these 3 solutions, right?" And then I say, "All right, which one do you think is best?" Maybe number 2. And we talk through it, and maybe I agree or maybe I don't, but we talk through why it is or isn't the best decision, and then I say, "All right, good. So we agree, number 2, go do it." "Well, me? Yeah, go put it in place. Let's make it." And before long, Joe just comes by my office and says, "Hey, boss, I want to let you know we had a problem, but I figured it out, and it's all handled." Awesome.
Love it. Right? Love to hear it. So I think those can be the marching orders for some folks. I know that I'm going to deal with some things even in the next 24, 48 hours that are going to be in that zone where give people permission, give them feedback immediately, let them know that you're counting on them, but you're also cooperating with them in that process. I think that's going to be really helpful.
Back to our initial exercise, and we'll wrap with this. Hopefully, you've thought of some leaders that you like. Hopefully, you've identified some character qualities. Things like they're able to make good decisions under pressure. They keep a cool head under pressure. They're disciplined. They hold themselves to a high standard. They have character. They're good communicators. They can provide clarity where there's confusion, and all of these and lots more that we could come up with, right? Then here's the challenge. Think about your own leadership. I don't care whether you're a C-level executive, the owner, or the cashier at McDonald's. Think about your own leadership and say, how am I doing on those things? Am I good at remaining calm under pressure? am I appropriately decisive? Am I do I give public praise and private criticism? Do I share credit when the team wins, and do I take responsibility when there was a team failure? And all these kinds of character traits. Evaluate yourself against those and pick one or two of them and say, I'm going to work this week on getting better at that. For me, I did this morning before this podcast.
Yeah, okay.
I wrote, and I came up with a whole list of things, and then I identified 3 or 4 things where I said, all right, I'm going to work on that trait over the coming few weeks and see if I can't get better. If we're not intentional about our growth, we tend to just float through life and assume that the problem is with everybody else, right? Why can't these people lead?
Right.
Well, let's work on ourselves this week and see how we can become better leaders.
You've got your marching orders, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us once again on another great episode, Leadership This Week at Grow with Tim.